All right. So I want to talk about the ego. Ego. E-G-O. What is the ego? Most people will tell you the word ego. A person's ego is the sense of pride, sense of self-importance, arrogance, whatever the case may be, and that's not wrong. That's you hear somebody say he's egotistical, right? It usually means if a person's egotistical, what they're saying is they're very conceited, could be cocky, arrogant, all that. And none of that is wrong. None of that is wrong. But the ego is more than that. And I want to talk to us real quick about what the ego is, the nature of the ego, the fundamental the fundamentals of ego, what it really means. None of that is wrong. Again, if a person gave that definition to me, I wouldn't say they're wrong. I would just say it's not a fully developed definition. It's not a fully flushed out definition. What the ego is, essentially, what your ego is, it's a sense of self that you have identified with. I'm gonna say that again. It's an identity. It's a false identity that you believe yourself to be. That's really when you think about the nature of the ego, what it is. That's why, listen, why you think people, I'm sure you heard this term, alter ego, right? Alter ego is just an altered ego, which is a version of yourself that's been altered. So you have an alter ego, which is a version of yourself that has been altered. Altered mean modified and or changed in some sense. So the ego is more than just, again, egotistical behavior. He's arrogant, he's cocky, he's boastful. Those are traits of the ego, but it's not the ego itself. So the ego itself is an identity that you have attached yourself to and believe yourself to be separate. That's the key. The ego is separate from who you really are. It's a separate self that you have identified with and believe yourself to be. Why that's important, it's very important that we get that distinction, because in the book of, I believe, Psalms 51 verse 5, David says, I was born into sin and shapen by iniquity. The word shapen or shaped is interesting, because when you shape something, hold on, excuse me here, got a little bit of allergies, excuse me. When you shape something, you're having an impact on the development of the character or the outcome of that person or that thing that you're shaping. So to shape something means to develop it, to significantly influence it, impact it by guiding it in a specific direction, specific character that you want to see developed, or a specific outcome that you like to see. So to shape something, in short, it's essentially it means that you have an impact and influence on how someone is developed or their evolution. I'm gonna say it again. To shape something means essentially you have an impact, a significant impact on how that person or that thing is going to evolve. Ooh, Psalms 51 got a whole new light. Seen it in this whole new perspective, give it a whole new meaning to me. Psalms 51 verse 5, go read it. I was shapen by iniquity. Now the word iniquity there, iniquity means evil. It means wickedness, morally bad. Iniquity. I was shapen by iniquity. Shapen, again, I just said it. I'll say it again real short. As essentially, shapen means you significantly impact the development or the evolution of someone. You significantly influence the development or the evolution of someone. You significantly impact the development, the evolution of someone's character. I'm gonna say it again. To shape means, or shapen means, you significantly impact a person's character and how they evolve. Now look at what David says in Psalms 51. This is interesting. Who was he shaped? Because if something is shaped or is being shapened, you have to have a shapener. You see what I'm saying? If David says I'm shapened, then who's doing the shaping? which is the ing, the shape in, which is a gerund verb, which is a participle. Now I'm going into grammar. The action itself. So if David says, I was shaping, who's the shaper? In this case, he says, I'm shaping by who? Iniquity. Iniquity is therefore given can be understood in the sense of an embodiment or personification. I was shapen by iniquity. Iniquity, therefore, is personified. Because he said I was shapen by. And I told you, shaping means to significantly impact the evolution of someone, their character, the outcome of their character. Why is that important when I talked about the ego? I'll tell you why it's important. Because the ego, as I told you, is an identity that you have attached yourself to and you believe yourself to be. It's an altered ego, a version of yourself. That ego is what iniquity has shapen you to be. I'm going to say that again real slow for those in the back. The ego, the altered version, alter ego. We see it a lot with celebrities. They talk about alter ego, their alter ego. The alter ego is the identity that iniquity has shapen and you believe yourself to be. Boom, 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 boom. As they would say, drop the mic. I think that's a drop the mic moment right there. But we're going to pick the mic back up. We're going to keep it going. So, ego, it's so important that we crush the ego. That we, if not crush, disidentify ourselves from the ego. Because the ego is shapen by the personification of iniquity. And iniquity is pure evil. It's wickedness. And shapens, I told you, means to significantly impact the evolution of a thing or a person or the development of their character. This is why in the last few videos I talk about your life has been scripted. And the scripter, the writer, the producer is the personification of iniquity. Who has been scripting, impacting, significantly influencing, developing the outcome of your character. So it's so important that we disidentify ourselves from the ego, because the ego is not who you are. It's an altered version. And this is why if you end up in prison, it's not by accident. If you're the subject of recidivism, where you keep getting out of jail, going back to jail, getting out of jail, going back. I'm just giving you an example. That's the result of iniquity, your shaping the personification that has molded shape in you to create that alter ego who you now believe yourself to be. And that alter ego cannot help you. To the contrary, the alter ego has to destroy you. It must kill you. This is why it says it's shapen by iniquity. Iniquity is pure evil. Evil is not going to bring you anything good. Evil can't do you anything good. Evil has nothing good in store for you. Evil can only destroy you. And evil is the author of that alter ego. This is why it's so important to disidentify yourself from the ego, because you're not your ego. Your ego is a construct that was constructed by the author, which is the father, iniquity. Its father is iniquity. So this is why it's so important to make sure that you disidentify yourself from the ego. The ego is not who you are. It's a false self that you have identified yourself to be. Now, if you are hooked on drugs, if you're an alcoholic, it is not by accident. It is scripted. It is by design, scripted by the ego, which is fathered by iniquity. See how that works? Iniquity creates, molds, and shapes the ego. The ego you now identify yourself with, influence and shape and dictates how you behave, move, act. And so everything you're doing is scripted. None of it is by accident, including myself. I'm not above beyond reproach here. I'm not exempt. This is why Jesus says we need to be what? Born again. Paul says the same thing, but he says it in a different way when he says, be not conformed to this world, but transformed through the renewing of your mind. That's both. They both said it. Jesus said it, be born again. Paul said, transform the mind. Be not conformed to this world, be renewed through the transform of your mind. It's the same thing. They're both saying the same thing. Born again, transform the mind. Essentially, it means you got to do a complete self-overhaul. You know, when companies do overhauls, right? It's a complete regeneration. Jesus even says it, he says, who will join me in the regeneration? Companies do that. They overhaul. They remake everything. They do everything over. Tear it down, build it back up anew. And that's what we have to do. That's the interesting thing, right? It might sound, a lot of times you can think it sounds discouraging. You can think, oh, it's a lot of work, but that's why you're here. That's why you chose to come down here to this planet and to experience matter. That's why you chose to come down here, and you heard me right. You chose to come down here and to experience matter, mass. Why do I say you chose to come down here? Jeremiah chapter 1. I knew you. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. I'm paraphrasing. That's what God says to the prophet Jeremiah. Before you were in the womb, I knew you. Implying that you already existed before you came down to the womb and decided to come the 9 months, the 3 trimester gestation period to become flesh and bone. I knew you before you manifested in flesh and bone. Therefore, you already existed. Your existence was already, you already existed before that. So it's important that we understand why we're here. You are here to have fun with the experimentation of overhauling yourself, rebuilding yourself, disidentifying yourself from the ego. It's why you're here. That's why we chose to come here, to have the earthly experience. All of it. The heartbreak. We chose for that. We asked for that. The bankruptcies, the death, the loss, the divorces, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the right. All of it. We wanted that. We wanted that experience. That's what it means to be human. When you come to this realization, suicidal thoughts lose their grips on you. There's no need to commit suicide because this is what we chose to experience. It's like a video game. You know, when a video game, you choose your characters and then you could choose the, like a car racing game, you could choose your tracks. I remember Rad Race as a kid, playing Rad Race as a kid. You could choose the tracks. It shows you what tracks, and you could choose what tracks you want to go on. And every track has different obstacles on it. And you could choose the chassis, the color of the car and all that. That's the body. We choose the body.